The following podcast is a Dear Media production.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Real Stuff podcast. And we're about to do something a little bit different for the next 2 episodes. Essentially, we just recorded an episode with a guest. It ended up being over an hour and a half as far as our recording went. And as soon as it was done, I realized this is actually 2 very different episodes. So part 1 was more of a deep dive into a chronic illness that she's been dealing with. And part 2 was more of a personal story about the loss of her sister and her grief journey. And as we got into this interview and as we wrapped it up, I was sort of thinking, what a shame to put that second part of this episode just slapped, in the last 30 minutes of an hour-long interview. I think that these are actually 2 very different stories and should be split into 2 episodes. So what you're hearing right now is part 1, and this is with our guest, Maya McHenry. Maya is a publicist. She's an activist. She's a philanthropist. She also happens to be the younger sister of a lovely woman named Lyric McHenry, who I used to work with at Refinery 29 and who unfortunately tragically passed away in 2018. Maya and I were having a conversation on this podcast specifically about the endometriosis that she has been navigating and struggling with for years and years. And we dove into that a lot in the first half of the conversation. She has incredible insights. She's shared her journey of how she's managed it all. And then I brought up her sister Lyric. And as she told me at the end of this episode, she has never opened up about Lyric on a podcast like she did today. So at the end of that part of the conversation, that's when I knew this needs to be a part 2 of the show. So what you're going to hear in today's episode is the first half of my talk with Maya, primarily with us talking about her endometriosis story. One thing that we didn't get into too much, although she does mention that as a woman, there's a lack of representation and a lack of support in the medical field for women who are going through illnesses like this. We didn't get too much into the fact that Maya is a Black woman and that there's even more underrepresentation and even more of a barrier in the medical space for Black women. And that's just one thing I wanted to call out, because if we hadn't moved on to the conversation about Lyric, I probably would have probed even deeper into that area. But I hope this conversation about endometriosis is eye-opening and thought-provoking for people out there. I also hope it's comforting for anyone who's going through this or has been continuously ignored or misdiagnosed by doctors, specifically around endometriosis. And please head to the show notes of this episode, because we are linking for you the foundation, the Endometriosis Foundation, that she is part of and, does philanthropy for. And I want you guys to have a place to go after this. So without further ado, let's get into part 1 of this conversation with Maya McHenry. Hi, Maya. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's so lovely to meet you officially. I feel like the moment I saw your face, you looked very familiar to me. And I know you're a model, you're a philanthropist, you're an activist. You wear a lot of hats. So I'd love for you to just start off by introducing yourself and sharing from your point of view who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Maya McHenry. I am the Director of Brand Partnerships and Influencer Relations at Fan of Your Brand, powered by Sky Blue Media. So I work in PR. My sister, Lyric McHenry, passed away, and she was my best friend, my mentor, my everything. And in her honor, I started an arts fellowship at Stanford at her alma mater to support and fund summer internships for students. Because Lyric always used to say, Maya, how are people supposed to get to the door if they can't even get in the door? And not everybody's family has the funds to send their child to Paris or New York or LA or wherever the internship is for an internship that doesn't cover anything and doesn't promise you a job. So we help take care of all of those really important needs that they need in order to survive and pursue the internship. And then we also help actually secure jobs for our fellows as well. And we stay in their lives. We're not the type of family that's like, here's the money, bye. All of our fellows actually have my personal cell phone number. Like I speak to them all the time. I catch up with them. They're a part of our village. So that's very, very important to me. And then I also sit on a few different organizations and boards that are really close to my heart. I'm an ambassador and board member for the Endometriosis Foundation of America. I am an endo girly, a survivor. And then I also sit on the board for creates Fashion Now, which is a nonprofit organization that provides comped lawyers and consultants for BIPOC designers and helps them get into high-end stores. So I'm kind of all over the place.
In the best way
Yeah.
possible. First of all,
Yeah.
congratulations on everything you've done. You are incredible. We are just so lucky to have you here on the show and to get this moment with you, to get to hear everything about you. There really are infinite pathways we could go down with this interview, and I'm sure
Yeah.
each of them would make for an incredibly interesting episode. The one avenue that I wanted to focus on, because we have not yet had a story about this come onto the show, but I know that it's something that 1 in 10 women are dealing with, and a lot of people will find relatable, is endometriosis. And I've seen
Yeah.
your posts and your stories about the crazy journey you've been on, the misdiagnoses you've been given, and the ways you've been ignored in the medical field. And I basically want to give you the space to take us back to when you first discovered symptoms of this and when this first started popping up in your life, and just what that's meant for you and kind of the ramifications of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to thank you, for giving me this space to talk about a disease that I feel like is just now becoming somewhat popular. The first time I ever experienced, I call them endo episodes, my episodes. So the first time I ever experienced symptoms, and I wouldn't even say, I would call this more an episode because my whole life I've always had a sensitive stomach and very sensitive to certain foods. So my doctor is actually convinced that I was born with endometriosis. But my first actual episode of endo was in high school. I was a senior and I was at home with my sister Lyric and my mom. And I still don't remember piece by piece of what really transpired because unfortunately I passed out, which is very, very common with women with endo because the pain is so horrific that sometimes like you just can't take it. And also you can get severely dehydrated from the nausea that you experience as well and everything else. But I remember just like being at home and I was having this excruciating pain. Apologies we're about to get really, really graphic here.
Go
So
for it.
it felt like a knife basically going up my private place up to my stomach, like a knife stabbing pain is what it felt like. And it was so horrific. I didn't know what was happening. And I ended up passing out. And I had to have my sister and my mom actually tell me that I passed out because when I got to the hospital and I woke up, I didn't even realize that I passed out. And
Can we pause for 1 second just so
yeah,
that you can
yeah,
define for people, in case someone is not familiar,
yeah.
what is the definition of endometriosis, and then what are the pain signals physically from?
Yeah, I would say like there's so many different definitions of endo, and I'll also say before I say my definition, I'm going to call it my definition, is that there's still so many questions.
Mm.
Endo still doesn't even have a known cure yet. So there's a lot of different research and questions that are still up in the air about endometriosis. By the way, it can also, a lot of misconceptions here, but endo can also grow in other places besides your pelvic area. Like I had to get an appendectomy, for example, because my doctor was afraid that it would grow inside of my abdomen.
Mm.
But for my definition of endo is that it is a infection that grows that can also be hereditary or you can also develop it inside of your pelvic area, which causes an array of different symptoms from severe pelvic pain to nausea to painful intercourse to painful bowel movements, extreme, a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of endo survivors constantly pass out and faint. But those are, I would say, like the main symptoms. You can also experience brain fog. Also, a lot of the pain I would say usually comes during your menstrual cycle, but it depends because there's different stages of endo. There's endo stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So depending on how severe it is, you can have an array of different symptoms. So it just depends on the different stages as well. I know that was a very long spiel. But yeah.
My thought process going into this, from what I've heard in the past, is that endometriosis actually is the uterine lining or like the tissues that would normally be inside of the uterus growing outside of the
Yes.
uterus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's the medical definition.
And you're
Yeah.
saying it can grow not just, on the outside of the uterus, but it can be growing in other areas of the abdomen and other parts of the body.
Yes, exactly. Because, like, if you look it up, on the internet, you'll get a definition similar to what you just said. You'll get like, well, there's like 5 different definitions, but I'll read. Endometriosis is a condition in which cells similar to the lining of the uterus or endothelium grow outside of the uterus.
Right.
Endometriosis often involves the pelvic tissue and can envelop the ovaries. So, it mainly, usually when you hear somebody talk about endo, it's usually they're talking about pain in their pelvic, but it can grow in other additional areas. And my endo was so severe that my doctor was just like, you've been through so much, we're going to give you an appendectomy as well, just to make sure that it doesn't grow over there, because there's so many other places that it can grow depending on the stage and how severe it is. So I think there's just a lot of like misconceptions, about endo, which we can get to later, but it's really just because there's such a lack of funding and research in endometriosis. So organizations like EndoFound are actively doing the research and finding new treatments and trying to find a cure. So it's organizations like that that are close to my heart that are, not just talking about it, but actually doing the work.
You guys know that I'm really intentional about the products that I put on my skin. I get sent a lot of PR, a lot of stuff, and I feel like I will try any product once, but it really takes a lot to get me to stick and become a loyal user, and ClearStem has become one of those brands for me. 2 ClearStem products that I've completely fallen in love with are the Gentle Clean Hydrating Barrier Cleanser, basically their face wash, and the Skin Spray All Day Hydration and Clearing Mist. The cleanser smells so amazing. It gets all foamy and it gives me that deep, thorough clean without stripping my skin. And then the mist I use constantly. I spray it in the morning before I put on makeup. I spray it after makeup to set it. I'll even give my skin a spritz right in the middle of the day if I just need to feel revitalized and hydrated, especially in the winter. My skin feels dry all the time and this just instantly perks it up. But really, it's the combination of these 2 products that makes my skin feel like I just left a spa. First the face wash, then the mist. I'm fresh, cool, tingly, like freezing cold. And since I've added these products into my routine consistently, my skin has just been smoother, clearer, happier. I really do believe having clear skin changes everything. And one of the biggest reasons that I trust ClearStem is their approach. Their entire skincare wellness routine is formulated with 0 pore clogging ingredients, and that is their Clear Pore Promise. And their products are clinically backed in third-party trials. People saw improvements in breakouts within 4 weeks, with even more progress after 12 weeks. They are truly dedicated to both safety and efficacy, which is really rare in skincare. And ClearStem is giving you all, my listeners, an amazing limited time offer. So from November 19th through December 2nd, so this is happening right now, you guys, ClearStem is giving you guys a free Hydration Heroes mini kit when you spend $75 or more at clearstem.com. So that's a $68 value featuring their best-selling Hydro Glow Moisturizer, their Hydra Berry Moisture Mask, and their Golden Hour Watermelon Barrier Oil. Perfectly sized for trying a new routine, for traveling, or for gifting to someone. Just use the code all caps RealStuffHH at checkout on clearstem.com to claim your free Hydration Heroes mini kit. That's code all caps RealStuffHH for your free Hydration Heroes mini kit. So how old were you when you had this first episode where you fainted?
I just turned 21.
Okay.
So I was, not even, sorry, but endo kind of, and trauma kind of distorts your memory a bit. I was a senior in high school, so I was about like 19, 20. Like I said, I was just at home with my sister and my mom, and I was like about to graduate and head to New York to go to college. And I ended up passing out from that excruciating pain. And I had to be rushed to the hospital, and nobody knew what was wrong with me. Everybody just like assumed, like they associated it with anxiety and Lyme disease, which is something else that I had because I rode horses professionally and I got bit by a tick at a really young age. So that's yet another underlining disease, Lyme, that again, it's yet another disease that a lot of people just have so many question marks about. They basically just told me like all of these things that were just like had nothing to do with endometriosis. No one said the word endometriosis to me once. The only person who ever brought it up was my sister Tiffany, who did have endometriosis. And so many people and doctors kind of instilled fear in my parents' brains and mine that getting a procedure, because technically the only way to really medically know and diagnose you with endometriosis is to get a laparoscopy, which is the surgery that you get to not only diagnose the disease, but also to remove the endometriosis. But some doctors who aren't endo specialists will just diagnose you and then not remove anything, or they'll just remove a little bit of it. And then it just continues to grow and just get worse and worse. So a lot of the doctors that we were meeting with were saying like, Maya's too young to get this invasive surgery to diagnose her with this disease that she probably doesn't have. Even my own like childhood gynecologist that has known me for so long, like did not want me to get this procedure. I mean, she had good intentions, she kind of thought of me as a daughter, but she did not think I had endometriosis. And I ended up having just hospital visits after hospital visits, just regularly having these episodes all of a sudden. Like I would just be hanging out with friends and then all of a sudden not feel well and have to like go to the hospital. Like it was just became my life almost. And we continued to look at other doctors and explore different people. But remember, like this was all new to us. We were also just now learning about endometriosis. And it's very confusing and very complex. And also the fact that like endo, specifically is like circulates women. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of like benefits or even like, I would say with women's health in general, like it's just not prioritized, unfortunately. So with that being said, like it just kind of became my life. And I remember this one instant that was just like so embarrassing for me. And I was in college and I was like walking to my school cafeteria and I ended up passing out and my head hit the glass door. So if it wasn't actually for my friend who was with me, who like caught me, it could have just been so much worse. And I remember waking up in front of like my whole student body, basically just like staring at me. And I was just like on the ground, just like looking up at everybody. And then the ambulance came and it just became something that was just like, I just accepted, because again, as women, there's so many times I feel like, and I don't want to speak for other women, but I feel like me as a woman, like we're taught to, survive. I kind of just thought like, oh, I'm a woman, it makes sense that I'm having excruciating periods and that, sexual intercourse is horrible for me. And like all of these things, like it just makes sense, because I'm a woman. And I just kind of like accepted it at one point. And I had so many male doctors in particular tell me, that it was my anxiety, because I did struggle with anxiety later on in life, and that they would just blame it on a series of other different things and just give me all these medications that were making everything worse, like opiates. They would give me Dilaudid and morphine, medications that they use for cancer patients, because the pain was so horrible that they didn't know what to do. So that's another thing, is it's hard, like when an endo patient has to go to the hospital, because you have to be an endo specialist to even know how to treat an endo patient, or else they're just going to give you a bunch of things that you don't need. So I went on years with undiagnosed endo, until one of my doctors he said that he saw endo cells within me and that I had endo symptoms. And my really, really good friend, Corinne Fox, who's also an ambassador for the Endometriosis Foundation of America, was my first friend who really got it, because she had endo as well, but she really helped educate me on it. And really, she introduced me to like the first doctor who I got my surgery with. And she really, really just helped me through my endo journey in general. The first doctor before, let me back up a bit. The first doctor before Corinne actually introduced me to her doctor, I had a surgery in New York where it was similar to what I talked about earlier, where like, sometimes they'll just diagnose you, not remove anything. So that's happened to me where I got my first surgery and she just removed like a little bit of it and she diagnosed me with it. So it just continued to grow and grow and grow and grow.
Can I ask why she didn't remove more? And, what did she say when
Yeah.
she went in laparoscopically? What did she see?
Yeah.
And then why was her decision to just take out a little bit?
Because she wasn't an endo specialist, and there's like a lack of, unfortunately, there's like a lack of care
Mm.
to even really prioritize endometriosis. So she used it more as a diagnosis rather than actually removing the endometriosis. And this, unfortunately, is very common with like a lot of women. I mean, now, in 2025, my first surgery was when I was still in college. So there's been so good changes within the endo community where, like, now, that's not as likely to happen, but unfortunately, it still does happen.
Did she describe to you what it looked like in
Yes.
there?
Yes, she didn't describe to me. She didn't have a follow-up meeting with me, nothing. All she did was send me the test results and said that I had stage 2 endometriosis. That's
Mm.
what she said to me. And that
Wow.
was it.
Like no
And she just
follow
let
up?
me
That's crazy.
go off on my own. And I continued, of course, as you can imagine, to have pain. And then I had another surgery where they diagnosed me with stage 3. And that was with my friend Corinne's doctor, who then did remove a significant amount of endo, but unfortunately, endometriosis can also grow back. So
Right. That
my
was going to be my
endo,
next
yeah,
question was once you remove this tissue, who's to say it's not growing back? And also, I read that it often takes between 7 to 10 years to accurately diagnose someone with endometriosis. And in this case, it sounds like what you're telling me is that in order to actually make the diagnosis, even though they might see endo cells, I don't know if that was in your blood or however that first doctor
yeah,
saw it, but it sounds like you need to get inside of the abdomen to see that
correct,
there's endometriosis. And so,
correct.
can you share a bit about the cost of this procedure just so we understand the barrier for most people?
I mean, I won't say like the actual cost. I mean, it's different for each doctor. For the doctors that I experienced, it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Like not available to your average person
Right.
at all.
That's wild that in order to even get the diagnosis, you need to have thousands of disposable income to be able to go through the laparoscopic treatment. And it's not even a treatment, it's just a diagnosis.
And most of these doctors do not take insurance, so it's out of pocket.
Mm.
And you could have the best insurance. Yeah, with these types of underlining diseases, with these specialists, most of them do not take insurance. I had one doctor take insurance out of all my surgeries.
So, how did it feel when the doctor wrote back to you and said, "We found endometriosis"? Where do you go from there?
It was kind of like some people in my life, like my sister, were like, "We told you, we knew." And then for me, I was relieved because I had so many years of, and apologies, Lucy, I'm going to get a little emotional here, but I had so many years of just like wondering, like just somebody just like tell me something. I just wanted to have like something to go off of so that I could, then fix it. Because it was frustrating, it was frustrating to constantly like have these experiences at such a young age and not know exactly what's wrong with you for so many years and so many people telling you, so many different things. It was very frustrating. And when you're young, I had a boyfriend in high school and, I wanted to, in college, moving to New York, growing up in Los Angeles and moving to a place like New York, I wanted to experience things. And there were a lot of things that I missed out on because of my endometriosis, like things that I wanted to do in my career. School, I had to take summer school because there was so much classes that I ended up missing because of all the hospital visits. not being able to um, have pleasurable sexual intercourse, um, just things that normal people, get get to experience. I did not get to experience. And even like later on in life, the thing about endometriosis is because there's not a known cure, it's kind of forever in your life. So, you're still from time to time going to have like little endo flares that can put you out. And last year, my one of my best friends got married and I got sick, and I was supposed to be a bridesmaid but couldn't be in the wedding. So it's just like things like that are make me emotional, because you miss out on these like important moments in your life. Yeah, and it's really, really tough. And then on top of that, it's very hard for other people to understand, because I'm sure when people even see this interview, they're going to want to do their own research, because it is just so complex to talk about and to see. A lot of people with endo, you could be feeling fine one day, or for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then the next 10 minutes you're having an endo flare, and people are confused. They're like, wait, you were fine a second ago and now you're not. It's very, very, very confusing for people to witness.
It's also worth mentioning and just letting people in on the fact that we had this interview scheduled for last week, and you were actually supposed to come here to be in the studio with me, and you had to cancel the interview because you had an endo flare. And correct me
Yeah,
if I'm wrong, you wound up in the hospital,
in
right?
the hospital. Correct.
There you go.
Correct.
And so
And
we're
yeah.
so happy to see that you're here now, but that's, the fact that you've now been diagnosed with this for years, and it's something that just kind of flares up out of nowhere, must be so incredibly frustrating and sad and challenging to deal with. Hearing you talk about the way that, hearing you cry and seeing the emotion coming through as you're talking about how frustrating this has been for you, I feel like it reminds people, anyone who's ever been sick, forget a chronic illness or even something so painful like endometriosis, but even when you just have a cold and you're feeling run down and you wake up and you maybe have a fever or a sore throat, it's only in those moments when we're not feeling well that we start to recognize how much we were taking for granted the positive days and the days we were healthy and our health in general. Or anyone who's had a chronic issue or a major health issue knows that when you're in that state, the absolute only thing that you can focus on is just getting better, and let alone having to go through school, having to get professional jobs and opportunities while you're trying to manage an illness like this is so unfair. And I cannot imagine the stress and struggle that that's put you through.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, it's me and so many other women. I
Yeah.
mean, my doctor now is the founder of the Endometriosis Foundation of America, Dr. Setskin. He is now my doctor, and he has really saved my life every time, because again, like what I was talking about, an endo patient going to the hospital, when I had to cancel the interview and go to the hospital because Dr. Sexton is my doctor, he sends me to my headphones just keep
You're good.
I it's probably my body oil. I'm like obsessed with scents and aromatherapy and all the things. It's all just a part of it, just helps me like feel more like comforted and
Yes, I
relaxed. So
love
it's
that.
probably affecting the AirPods. But yeah, Dr. Sexton, he sends me to, a specific hospital that he of course, has privileges at, so he can monitor me
Mm.
and he can monitor what they're giving me and how they're treating me. And you need an advocate, especially when you have endometriosis in the hospital, because people really do treat it almost like they're like irritated with you. Like it's like an inconvenience that there is an endo patient in the hospital, because there's not this like direct quick fix. So they're just like, it's just like a drag for them. To have Dr. Sexton now as my doctor, has really just like helped me just feel so safe. And I have his personal cell phone number where, like I'll just call him if I'm having an endo flare and I'm like, Dr. Stetson, I need your help. I need your help. And he's just like, okay, Maya, okay. I got you. I got you. And I remember our second appointment together, he was just like, Maya, I am forever in your life. I am giving you my personal cell phone number so you can call me for emergencies. Like, he is that type of doctor. He is
Wow, that's
incredibly
amazing.
hands-on, and his daughter works with him in his practice. And for so many years I had so many men treat me the complete opposite. So
Yeah.
he is just a living angel and is just incredibly, my mom always tells me that he has really high emotional intelligence, because unfortunately a lot of doctors do lack emotional intelligence, and you need that when you're dealing with an endo patient because of the mind body connection. It's a very emotional disease. And after even working with Dr. Sexton only for a year now, like, I used to have endo episodes almost every other week. So there's been drastic changes, and even like the birth control pills, that I'm on right now have really helped during my menstrual cycles, which usually was the time, unfortunately, where it was just at its worst. Some doctors say that, you can develop it. A lot of women who've like been sexually abused or have been through any sort of like sexual trauma, it can be like how our bodies like respond to
Mm,
that trauma. And I am a survivor of molestation and sexual assault. So um, I, for me too, it's like I waited so long to be sexually active.
right.
And when I was, it was so abnormally painful. It wasn't like, like normal people's first time where like, yeah, it's painful, but this was abnormally, this was abnormally painful,
Right.
and just even doing other things, like even oral sex, that even hurt for me. Like I couldn't even wear tampons in high school. I could not get a tampon in. I tried. I remember Lyric and my best friend Elisa and I were in the Bahamas, and Lyric was trying to help me, and I was like screaming on the top of my lungs. And
Wow.
Lyric was like, "Okay, this is not normal. You're not wearing a tampon. You're just gonna wear a pad instead." But I had these like obvious symptoms of endometriosis at a very, very young age.
Wow. First of all, thank you so much for
Yeah.
opening up to us about your history of molestation and sexual assault and all these incredibly personal details that play into the story here. It's reminding me a little bit. We had a guest come on who talked about her experience of having vaginismus. And there was definitely some sort of a, not in her case, but in the stats she was providing, there was definitely some sort of a link between sexual trauma or shame, sexual shame that tied into it. And hearing you talk about endometriosis being such a mental, having a mental component to it also, it makes me want to dive into, we all know about the book The Body Keeps the Score, and mental and emotional issues leading to physical, like physically manifesting in pain or in other physical ways. Obviously, having physical pain can lead to a lot of mental anguish because you're just in pain and anxiety and stress and all of that. But are you saying that other mental health factors and maybe other lifestyle things happening were actually leading to the physical flare-ups as well?
I don't think they were leading. I think that they would ignite them and make them worse.
Mm,
So if I was having an endo flare, and because I was already somebody who had severe anxiety. I also, after my sister Lyric passed away, I had extreme depression and PTSD, and I actually had to go away for a while, to a place called La Ventana, and I was there for over a month. And they offered all sorts of different treatments. I mean, everything that you could pretty much think of, from like EMDR, CMDR to art therapy, trauma therapy. But you're there, for a month. You don't have your phone. You're very isolated. Yeah, it was a really, really special place. I mean, I would go back there now.
where was
It was not
that?
special. It was deep deep, kind of like close to the valley
In California.
in California. Yeah. You can call it a mental health institution, but it's very more so centered. I mean, you're in a house. There's a few different houses that you can choose depending on also just your comfortability or like what you've been through. My house was like all women.
Mm.
I couldn't have like any man. I couldn't even be close to a man at one point.
That's
So,
amazing that you were able to go to a center like that and to get that month-long mental health support.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't ultimately 100% my decision at first. I was having back-to-back panic and anxiety attacks that were getting in the way of my daily life. And I got to a point where I told my parents, I was like, you guys, like, I'll work harder, I'll get better, like, I'll go to the stables and ride more, and I'll make sure to do therapy every day, and I'll do this and I'll do that. And I kind of like made this like deal with them almost, that I could create kind of my own program instead of going to a place because I was very scared to go to a place, to be completely honest with you. And then it just got to a point where my dad specifically, well, both of them, were just like, you need to go to this place. We did a lot of research on a series of different places, but this is the one we landed on. And my parents like did a tour, and they just felt really safe about this particular place.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went, I had no idea what to expect, and I was so intimidated by the whole situation. But I remember right when I walked into my room, my roommate, who I didn't even meet yet, wrote next to my bed, like on my board, it said, "Welcome to a place where it's okay not to be okay,"
Mm.
with a heart. And she didn't even know me yet.
Yeah.
And I just felt so like welcomed, and it was such a beautiful house, and there was like sound machines everywhere and beautiful quotes, and it was just very uplifting. And I was just like, I knew when I saw that note that she wrote me, I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be here.
Right. Did you have any endo flares when you were there?
No, I did not.
That's
I didn't
great.
have any endo flares while I was there. You're doing trauma work from like 7 a.m. to like it's like all day. You're doing back to back trauma work. So yeah, no, I didn't have any endo flares while I was there. And I was working on my mental health in a way that I've never worked on
Mm.
my mental health before. Yeah, it was truly an amazing experience and something I truly needed. I mean, I've had therapy since I was a little girl, but it got so severe from losing my sister to the abuse that I've endured, and all of these things, that have happened to me at such a young age, as a young adult specifically. I think, I thought just having one therapist would be enough. I wanted to be strong, too. I wanted to be strong and survive through all of it. And I felt like going to a place like that made me weak. And I felt embarrassed, by it. But after, like when I went, I was so proud of myself that I went. And I'm so proud to say that I went today,
Mm-hmm.
because it not only helped with my endometriosis, it helped with how I handled my endometriosis. Because even that last episode that recently happened when I had to cancel the interview, usually I would have had a full blown anxiety attack if I started feeling that type of pain again. And I was like using my tools. I was like getting my ice bucket, dipping my face in my ice bucket, which is one of my tools. I immediately called Dr. Sexton. He told me to go to the hospital. I got myself together, but I remained calm and I utilized my breath because meditation is a big tool that I use as well for my anxiety. And breathing, I feel like breathing is so underestimated in like the mental health and wellness community. And we all have access to it. And it's hard to think like when you're in excruciating pain to breathe, but it really helps.
Mm.
And so the way that I treat my episodes now, and even how I act in the hospital, because usually when I'm in the hospital too, like my anxiety makes things so much more severe and so much worse, and it makes the pain worse as well. So just even how I act now when I am having an episode is so drastically different than how I would have acted even like I would say even last year. So I've really I would say I've just worked a lot on myself in general in order to like get to where I am now.
Can we discuss Lyric?
Yes, my beauty, my background on my phone, my everything.
Let's
I
see
have,
her. If you're watching on
see, I
YouTube,
have,
we're about to see her. So beautiful.
that's my girl.
Hey guys, this is where I'm going to end part 1 of this episode. As I said, the rest of this episode, which will be coming out next week, is really one of the most emotional deep dives we've had on the podcast. There have only been a few episodes of this show that have made me cry, but I was sobbing my eyes out, and the conversation was so profound and so deep and so important. So as I said, I really would love it to have its own episode. So please come back to the show next week to hear Maya talk about her beautiful sister. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this episode and you're liking the Real Stuff podcast, please give the show a 5-star rating and review on Apple and Spotify. If you're listening on YouTube, we would love to hear what you thought of this interview with Maya. And we hope to see you next week when we talk about Lyric. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Real Stuff podcast. If you're liking the show, please head over to Apple or Spotify and leave us a written review. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment down below and join in the conversation. And if you're feeling called to be a guest on the show, visit luciefink.com/apply and tell us your story. Thank you so much, as always, for sharing your time and attention with us, and we will see you next time on the Real Stuff podcast.
Please note that this episode may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products and services. Individuals on the show may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to in this episode.